when you listen to this podcast, you probably had some time in your life where you applied somewhere, most likely for a job. And now remember, how did that go? And of course, some people might listen to this, and I'm one of them, although I'm speaking, not listening here. They came from a time where you could say, well, when you applied for a job, you are the one who were seeking out, not the organization. The organization knew there was a lot of choice on the market, and they behaved accordingly. Tables turned, and not for the better for organization. Now there is talent scarcity. And often when people apply, they now say it just takes too long. And our topic of discussion today is, what is the role of time in the job application process? It is pretty obvious we have talent scarcity. Unfortunately, still, when we look into feedback from people who apply with organizations, it takes way too long for organizations to act on the matter of what they actually want to do. And that means you always say you focus on the applicant, but most organizations do not, or at least they are very much stuck into their their internal processes, taking weeks, sometimes even months, to decide in favor or against an applicant. So when is time relevant, and are there aspects that you should consider? Is there some sort of model? And yes, there is. We will now discuss how to make application processes better in a more timely manner. Also, we will discuss the role of time today. And also, I'm going to show you a phase model where you can see, are we doing right, or do we have some potential to still change for the better? There is, well, what normally you expect me now to start with phase one, aspect, step one, phase one, call it as you like. There are 5 steps, no question about that. However, there is a step 0. And the step 0 means you need to tell people where to apply. Easiest way is to apply via email. However, many people now have an applicant management system. And very important now is your applicant management system does not determine how people apply with you. I have seen, and also applicants complained about it online a lot, even with larger organizations, where people say, look, you have this one aspect where you say, please upload your CV, and then people upload their CV, and immediately the next aspect on the next page of your application software is, oh, could you please tell me what's your first position where you work, and your second one, and your third? And the right answer for that is, it is in my CV. Look at your application management system. Your software does not determine how you make people apply. When you're still in that position where you think that people need to stick to your software because, oh, you offer jobs, you are stuck in a situation which was possible 20 years ago, but it's not anymore. Make it as easy as possible for people to apply. It is perfectly fine to apply and say, here's the URL, here's the link to my LinkedIn profile. Of course, then you can expect a very good LinkedIn profile, including everything. And by the way, LinkedIn profiles often have the big advantage. You suddenly see a picture, because in most countries, you're not allowed to ask for a picture, while on LinkedIn, most people have one. And by the way, when, of course, LinkedIn is there, I mean anything that can be linked with a URL, can be a website, can be in Germany, for example, Xing. There are different platforms in different countries. However, LinkedIn is the main platform for anyone today. My LinkedIn profile is more important than anything else online, more important than my website or whatever else. When you then made a good choice that people can apply easily, then we start with step 1. Step 1 means the application arrives in your inbox. There's always an automatic confirmation that the application arrived. If you do not have this in place, you have to talk to your IT. An autoresponder is possible with any 4 free email accounts. So when you can't get that done, it is your fault, not the applicant's one. And it's perfectly understandable when the applicant calls you and tells you, well, did my application arrive? And while you, at the other end of the phone, probably roll your eyes, it is a completely understandable that it's your fault, not the applicant's one. Because you have to make sure that people know that the application arrived. And now you're sitting there on the phone while you have way better things to do. And you're looking for an email which most likely arrived. But people just want to be sure, did it arrive? You always need some sort of autoresponder, no exception. And by the way, with the autoresponder, you can often already tell people what is the timeline. If you don't want to do it in step 1, you do it at the very beginning of step 2. Step 2 is the first human contact. That means here you get the timeline. And I mean a committed timeline. You tell them this is step 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever situation you have in mind, whatever process you have determined. You tell them very clearly, how does this work? And you tell them what is the time frame we are talking about? And of course, this timeline has to adapt to the job. The more you demand, the more you have to offer. When you, for example, say we have 5 rounds of interviews, you definitely have to offer 60, 80, 100,000 or even more, because this must be a top-notch cutting-edge job. Unfortunately, not only in my circle of friends, but also when I see people online and the emails which only arrived in my inbox of this podcast, I saw people saying I had 5 rounds of interviews for a PA position. For the people who don't know what that is, personal assistant. And that was a PA position that paid £32,000 in London. For £32,000 in London, you can be happy when people do 2 rounds with you. And by the way, there is no scientific evidence that more rounds lead to better results. It is only displaying personal ego for many people who want to have a say and keep themselves relevant in the corporate game. Be more efficient. I know this sounds horribly German. However, the timeline always has to adapt to the job. You have to make very specific statements about how will this proceed with very specific, at least calendar weeks. When will which step happen? And by the way, when you now see in the application there's something missing, I give you an example. You are a company which focuses on public tenders in the architectural industry, and you can only apply for these public tenders when people have at least a master's degree in architecture. Then, of course, when you see someone doesn't have the master's degree, you can tell them, sorry, you didn't meet the requirements. Some people simply overread something in the job ad. Some people simply said, I'm going to give it a try. Some people probably, on your side, decided not to make it unambiguously clear that the master's degree is a must-have. When anything formal is missing, people can expect that you tell them within 3 days. 7 days is long, 3 days is good. Anything quicker is even better. Anything longer than 7 days, where people get a no based on formal aspects missing, is your fault. So when people then say, oh, I think I go on glassdoor.com and give them a really bad review, rightfully so. There is nothing wrong with that. Be clear, be specific. Because in step number 3, you have the first round of interviews. And that means you have a very clear interview guideline, which is especially important for the leaders, because I often see people in HR who do excellent interviews, who ask many questions, and the applicant keeps on talking. That's exactly how an interview works. On the other side, I often see leaders who do it vice versa. Display of ego, they talk 80% of the time, and the applicant basically can say absolutely nothing or very little. That is not the task of an interview, to put yourself in the center of attention. The goal is that the applying person talks the most. What you have to check in the first round, which normally happens on the phone or online, you have to check, is there a general fit? Are the aspect that we imagine this job is going to have, are these a match? And by the way, you also have to check for so-called knockout factors. Do people have to work, for example, in shifts? Do people have to work, for example, nights or weekends? Is there any kind of travel involved? How many weeks? Is there any kind of remote work offer, or is there no remote work offer, which is more of an issue today? And of course, payment. It does absolutely not make sense when you have 2, 3, 4 rounds, and in round number 3 or 4, you realize, oh, our expectations towards payment are so far apart that there is no way we are ever going to make it match. The knockout factors, where you say it's not a fit either for the applicant or for you, this is round 1 material. Round number 2, and that's phase 4 now. Round number 2, which normally happens either meeting in person or online, very hardly this happens on the phone. There you talk about the subject matter expertise. It's often about details, about how to cooperate with each other. You also finalize anything you need to talk about, and you finalize this in round number 2. Unfortunately, especially in the English-speaking world, I see way too many rounds happening. Anyone wants to have a say. They often have no clue how to do an interview. Most of what I see there is people saying, I expect this and I expect that, and then they have completely unrealistic expectations. While at the end they say, oh, by the way, we don't pay too well. And here are the news. If you don't pay too well, people won't work too well. That's the deal. That's how the economy and any organization works. Very important here in round number 2, you can have multiple people in the same room, for example, on Zoom or on Teams, and then you can put them in different breakout rooms where you can simply say, okay, you talk to me first. When this is a fit, I put you in this breakout room, and after that, I put you in that breakout room, which works perfectly fine. Very important is give people clear guidelines how to do interviews properly. After round number 2, when you are really well organized, you can go to phase 5. So we now have phase 0, telling people where to apply. Phase one, the application enters your inbox or your software. Phase number two, first human contact. Phase number three, the first round. Phase number four, the second round. Now phase number five, which is the decision. Unfortunately, in many organizations, phase number five is the round where anyone should go, oh, can I have a chat with a person? Can I have a chat with a person? I work with that person as well. When you have a team of 8 people and maybe a department leader, don't expect anyone to have 9 rounds of interviews. That is not how anything works. It is nothing else than display of ego, making yourself more important than you are. And by the way, when you have so much time that you need to talk to any applicant personally, although you're only one small part of their world, then you obviously do not have enough to do. And please don't tell people you're stressed, because you're obviously not. Very important that in round number 2, and that was phase 4, you talk about anything you need to talk. When you go through multiple rounds of interviews, you're losing many people on that way. Phase number 5 is the decision. And that happens in a timely manner after phase number 4, just a couple of days, normally 3 days, preferably less. Best is you either say yes, or when you say no, you give them a reason. I know that in many countries there are legal limitations, and with these legal limitations, it makes it very hard because of legal liabilities that people actually get a yes or no from you. And saying no with a reason always helps people. However, you have to give them proper reasoning. The next step then is you actively, and that's still phase number 5, you actively manage your reputation online. So when you say, okay, they liked it and it worked well, even when it's a no, tell them, could you please go on glassdoor.com? I'm going to send you a link. Please leave us a review. And this has to be managed actively, because otherwise you only get the people who complain online. It is your task to manage your reputation online actively. And by the way, with fake reviews, which anyone spots immediately, it's not going to work. And then you have the decision, and there you go. There are a couple of aspects which I'm going to add because many people ask about it. So the first one is the assessment center. If you have assessment centers, they have to fit to the job. When you have an entry-level job and you do an assessment center, that is complete megalomania. Who do you think you are? People apply for a low-paid job with a lot of stress, and you do an assessment center? Seriously? You need to have very good reasons to do that. Most organizations do not have that reason, so step away from doing that. The less rounds you have, the better. Just have fewer rounds. It's just something that makes an application move forward, and people will more likely work with you when they see you're really interested. By the way, the more you demand, the more you have to offer. Often it means payment. Bad payment never works. When you offer bad payment, it either means people will say no because they can't afford to work for you, or people who have a background of, for example, wealthy parents, or they grew up very privileged, they will work for you because they never worry financially. They are financially well off. However, they know that they are. So as soon as you become a bit stressful and say, hey, you have to work harder, you have to work quicker, they say, I don't have to. I'm not relying on you. Thank you, no thank you, and see you next time. And you lose the talent you wanted to keep. It's never a wise choice to only rely on privileged people. It's never a wise choice to rely on privileged people. You have to pay well if you expect great work. If you have any kind of ego person in the application process, please take them out or train them well to get the ego out of the application process. When you have too many people being part of the process, it takes too long. And now we get to a very important aspect, because many people now will still have the question mark, how long can it take? 30 days max, preferably 28, 4 weeks. And now you look what you do, and many people will say, we are way slower. And then you normally immediately step into the excuses. And the excuses are either we are too small, we don't have the resources, or we are too big, it's impossible to organize that. I can tell you that Sven Zemet, who's a formerly senior manager at IBM, made it possible that IBM can do it within 30 days or less. From first contact to signature of contract, 30 days or less with IBM. So it is possible. Don't tell me it's not. You just have to put the right effort in it, and you have to put the right priorities on applying people. If you make people wait, they will go somewhere else. It is very important that when you prefer to wait and you say, oh, we're a bit special, we really want to see that people want to work with us, we want to be very slow on the decision-making process. The slower you are, you simply get the rest from the fest, as we say in Germany, the rest of the feast. You get the rest of the whole application process. People who either didn't get a yes anywhere else, and then you're stuck with them, people you don't want to have, or you have people who say, oh, I'm going to wait for you because it is such a safe job with a lot of benefits, especially state-run organizations have that problem. When people say the main reason to work for you is the safe job and the great benefits, it means nothing else than they don't really want to contribute. They want to have a stress-free life. As soon as it becomes stressful, they're going to call in sick or be absent any other way. Safe job and great benefits is, of course, for anyone, be happy to do so. But for any organization, be aware that when people are only there because they know you will never be able to fire them and the benefits are great, you will probably not get the applicant you want to in the job. You want to have highly engaged people who are subject matter experts, and then you want to have people who are highly engaged and also very productive. And when they say, oh, safe job, great benefits, that's not the ones you want to have. We call these people freeple. They want to have something for free, and they show up for anything that's free or where you have to give very little in return. When you stick to the step model or the phase model that I gave you before, you're on the safe side, and I wish you all the best doing so. And of course, there are now people who say, well, I have 1, 2, 3, 28 questions about this. So when you have any kind of things that you can talk about, just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. That's the email option. Or just drop me a line on LinkedIn. I just put both my email address and my LinkedIn profile in the show notes of this podcast. If you want to talk about anything very specific, either it's about can I book you for training, speaking, coaching? Yeah, you can, but we can also just chat about your topics. nb@nb-networks.com and my LinkedIn profile, both in the show notes of this podcast. The second aspect I always recommend is that you register for the leadership letter, because we have live sessions and you are able to join them at no charge for our listeners and readers. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, then you can register there. Just put your email address in there, and then you receive only one email per week every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content and no advertising. It's an ad-free guarantee. And every Wednesday morning, you will be up to date with anything I publish. And of course, access to the free sessions where you can talk to me live, and you will see when they are and how to access them right in the leadership letter every Wednesday morning. The third aspect is the most important one. Apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive aspects of change you want to see in your organization. I wish you all the best with that. I'm always happy to help, so drop me a line if you'd like to have a chat. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.